Hi everybody, my name's Shane and we are here at Clement's Family Farms. We're a small little homestead and we do all kinds of different things, and vanilla is one of those things that we do. So I'm going to take you through our steps and our process on how we do it. So we're here today on processing, and I talk about processing because I am going to cut and split them and then get them ready for the jars. And I encourage everybody to experiment on their own terms because my taste is different than your taste. So my process is, I won't say vigorous, but it's a little time consuming because I do split and pull the seeds out of every one of these, and I'll show that here. So we use the 1/2 gallon jars, and this is why. When I first started off, I used to put them in the smaller jars and then shake them and do all that, but I had 10 jars, 20 jars that I was doing that in, and man, if you're going to do this right and you want to get a faster product, you got to shake them every day, twice a day. I mean, that's what the old recipes were, was twice a day. And up until the last, probably 10 years, and people have been getting involved with Facebook and everything, there were only a couple recipes out on the internet on how to do this. People hadn't started experimenting with it. I've been doing it 28 years. I was always looking for something new, and the internet didn't have all that information. The information out there now is incredible, and that's from people experimenting and everything. So some of the questions I had in the very beginning, and there's some that can't be answered or nobody's answered them, because the original recipes were: put beans in a jar, fill it with alcohol, with whatever you had on the shelf, and then put it in a cool, dry, or a cool, dark cabinet. My question is, why? And was there something harming it from being out on the counter where sun or light can get to it? And some people said it breaks down the enzymes in the vanilla. Well, I've learned a lot about enzymes because I'm a hobbyist beekeeper and I deal a lot with honey. And there are enzymes that can hurt the beneficial health factor of what you're doing. I don't know anybody that is using vanilla for the beneficial health factor. I don't even know what they are because I haven't even looked into it, because I'm not into the health of what they can provide for me, medicinal wise. So I wanted to know. So I have done some experimenting. I've had bottles in the full sun, and I'll go over my complete process on how I do it, and I get the results I do in such a short amount of time. Because my vanilla extract is usually done between 3 to 4 months. And I'll show you how I test for when my extract is done and how far I'm going to take it before it's not worth my time and effort to keep it on the shelf any longer. Basically, if you're following FDA standards, which is 3 ounces per 750 milliliter of drinking alcohol, these are about 1,700 milliliters with your beans in it, full of fluid. So that's a little more than a double batch. So a single batch is 750 milliliters with 3 ounces of beans. So I'd have to put 3 ounces, 750 milliliter, another 3 ounces, and another 750 milliliter. Well, that leaves a little bit of a headspace, which is okay. because it does cover the beans. I just adjust my formula for that little extra headspace that's in there, so I could top these off to about here, and I still fall with under standards, FDA standards. So with my formula, I use 4 ounces of beans, a little over 4 ounces, 4.2, 4.3 ounces of beans per single fold recipe with 750 milliliters. So I'm going to have to put in, let's see, 9 ounces at least in here of beans, and then fill it up to the top. I use a vacuum sealer on these. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh these out. And that's typically what I do. I weigh these out in groups. I fill the jars. This will tell me how many jars I got to deal with. And then I'll process from here. So get yourself a good scale, and then make sure it's zeroed out on the surface that you're going to do. Make sure your beans are dry, not wet. And then what I'm going to do is measure out. Perfect. With that 8 ounces, it's still above the FDA standards if I fill this all the way to the top. Because you gotta remember, it's only 1,500 milliliters, only comes down to right about here, and it doesn't fill it all the way to the top. I'm gonna add another ounce, because I think that extra ounce per batch, for me this is a batch, I only do half-gallon batches. For me, that 9 ounces per batch takes that vanilla extract up just one more notch. If you go a little bit more, it will take you up to that double fold. But the taste difference between what I'm doing now and a double fold is not that much difference. So I still call mine a single fold. It's probably a fold and a half or a little bit better. So I'm going to add the extra ounce. I have the ounce right there. So now I've got 9 ounces in here, and I can fill it all the way up, and I'll be right at that that threshold. Stay within the standards. So that's what my jar looks like, full of beans. I'm going to continue weighing this out to see how many beans. I don't remember how many beans I had when I stored these away. And I will go ahead and fill this up, and then I'll bring you to the next part. I weighed everything out, got them in the jars, and I had a few scragglers. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take them and add them to each of my jar. So that's pretty much it. Now I'm going to go through the processing them, which is me splitting and pulling the seeds out, and I'll go through each jar. And I'm ready to start processing. So what I've done, I took that jar that was full of the 9 ounces of beans, and I dumped them out here, and I'm just going to cut the ends off and split them. And then what I do is I throw everything in the jar. So here we go. It's a pretty simple process. All I do is cut the ends off, and then I'll take this razor knife and go right down the center. I throw the ends in the jar, and then I open this up. And then I've got the seeds on the inside, and I just scrape them. I don't get crazy with this part. I just want to make sure I'm opening up these fibers. With them, I just want to open up these fibers so that the fluid can get around this vanilla pod a lot easier and a lot faster. So those are scraped out. I just put them in the jar and I continue on. I know everybody's going to freak out about these seeds, but I'll just leave them right there and I'll scrape them up when I'm done. My process does take a long time, but I know I'm going to get a faster result. And for me, I think the flavor's better of the extract because the fluid has actually had time to get around that whole pod. Again, cut the tips off. So when I'm all done making extract, I will use every bit of this. I'll use the seeds, I'll use these tips, and some of the vanilla pods for display in the bottles. And then the rest will all get dehydrated and used for vanilla sugar. Some of these vanilla pods are incredible. They've got a lot of seeds in them, but they're really meaty on the inside. And you can see this membrane that's in here too. It's kind of a, I don't know, like a silicone membrane. Well, you got to remember when you're making your extract and that fluid's got to get inside and onto this pod itself. If you don't remove that, it's going to make it a lot harder for that fluid to get there and make your extract. This is the reason why I do it. It doesn't mean that you're not going to make a good extract without doing this. It's just, it's going to take you a lot longer. Yeah, see, these are nice and opened up. Nice fibers, and goes in there. So some of you have asked about using the seeds or the caviar while you're making the extract. So some people, while they're making an extract, they'll need seeds for baking or whatever they're pudding, and they'll pull seeds out and then use them. Maybe they won't use the extract, but they want the seeds. And they talk about snipping the ends and then squeezing everything out. So I just want to remind people, if you're trying to stay within the standards, I'm only going to talk about FDA standards. As a hobbyist, you can do whatever you want. It won't matter. But for me, I try to stay within standards, and I give my friends and family a consistent, good product. So that's why I always speak of the standard. So with that, as soon as you pull out a bean and you extract something from it, you've just lowered the recipe. The recipe is calling for whole beans with the seeds. I've never seen an extract recipe that says remove the seeds and just use the pod, or just use the seeds. The recipe requires seeds and pods to make a single fold FDA standard. So as soon as you pull that out and use the seeds, you've just lowered the recipe. So I just tell people to wait. Just remember, anytime that you're going to pull fluid, now my recipe is a little higher. It's a little more than a single fold as far as ounces per fluid, so that's okay. and I would still fall within standards. You can do that. I just don't, because I use everything at the end. Because a lot of people say, well, how do you get these seeds out and so forth? This is so much easier just to squeeze them out. Yeah, it is easier. The process is a little harder my way. But once you do it, then you figure out this is actually the best way. And you'll see my bottles and stuff. So anyway, I'm just going to continue doing this and filling my bottles. And once I get them full, I'll take you to that step. Okay, I wanted to mention a little bit about the fold and the way I split these beans. I did mention it in the other video, but I wanted to be really clear. When I first started doing this, I used to split them right down the center and then open them up, which is fine. But I realized that if I split them right down the center, there's a natural fold on these beans. Just like a piece of cardboard paper or a piece of paper, there's a fold on them like this. Well, if I take the bean and split it right down the center like this, it wants to still taco like that, and it's harder for the fluid to get in and out. The process is easier, yes, but once you take it and you open it up and throw the beans out and you put it back in the fluid or put it in fluid, they want to naturally fold back up. So this is what I do now. I take the razor blade, I lay the bean flat, and then I try to cut it on that fold. It doesn't matter if you mess up or it's off a little bit, and then it cannot fold on itself again. It opens up. So that's what I do, and I just wanted to demonstrate that a little bit better than just cutting right down the center. So this does help speed up the process. Alright, well, we got everything cut and split, pulled the seeds out, and every batch, so I had 4 batches, and each batch is in one of these half-gallon jars, and they're ready to go now. So one thing I want to note is I had these beans in storage for a couple months. Well, actually a little over 6 months, as I mentioned before. So the fluid that I had around these beans during that time, I put off into a separate container, and then once I found out how many jars I can use with the amount of beans I had, then I took that fluid and I'm splitting it up between the 4 batches, the 4 actual half gallons here, because that way that's the same fluid that was around all those beans, and to stay within the standard, if I split that fluid up between the batches, then we're good. Staying within the standard, because I'm not removing that. I mean, it's beautiful stuff. We're talking, well, 9 times 4, how many ounces of beans have been sitting in that? About 4 cups of fluid during those 6 months. It's beautiful stuff, but like I said, I try to stay consistent with my batches, and the only way I could do that when storing is splitting up this fluid between the batches so they can finish up, and that keeps me above those standards. So anyway, here we are. Just like with any food saver, you need to wipe the lid, which I did already. I have my vanilla rags. Every time I spilt something, I have these rags. I daubed it up. My drawer smells incredible right now. Just like canning, you want to make sure there's no seeds or anything on the lid. That goes with these lids too. Now, I save my canning lids from my jelly jars or whatever I'm using. Once I pull them off and use the jelly, I save the lids for stuff just like this, because they will seal under this pressure. I will never use these for canning again, but they're perfect for this. I'm not doing long-term storage with them, and they're perfect. So I always write used on them. This one actually is worn off, but I usually put used on them as soon as I wash them. But we have a drawer where we keep all the used ones in case we need one for just sealing up a dry jar or doing something like this. So what I do is I need to fill it up. So here's the rest of the fluid. I already did these 3 jars. So all I do is top it off. Well, just put this fluid in there. Actually, there's a few little seeds in there. I'm going to rinse this out. And now, just going to top it off. I already know that this is 2 bottles plus whatever that is. I had already put, I had a little bit left over from these ones, so I put it in there, so don't panic. There is 2, this will be 2 bottles plus whatever the fluid was from the storage. Alright, well, I always fill them up to where this first ring starts and then leave a little bit of a gap in there for head space. Make sure the lid's clean. Put this on. They might be a little warped from being used, but once you put this on and push down on it, you'll be fine. Sometimes a lid just won't work. So anyway, I had this Food Saver vacuum sealer on the shelf, and I didn't realize it had the tube thing until later. But I was fortunate enough, this has the tube built in. It was tucked up underneath, couldn't even see it. So this has been working out great. They do sell these in the fermenting sections of, I believe, Amazon. But they have a little hand pump. They'll still work with these tubes, but these are really kind of hard to come by since the whole canning thing and this COVID. So, but in the fermenting, I believe it's in the fermenting section of canning and stuff like that. You can still find these, but they come with a suction. So that's great, because if you don't have one of these machines, you can still use that and it's fine. You'll see why I do it this way, because these beans are full of air. The seeds are full of air. I mean, there's air trapped around them, and it's just incredible how much air starts being pulled to the surface. So I'll just do that now. So I'm just going to hit that and then watch it. And you can see all the air pulling out of all those beans. So as it was vacuuming, you'll see the air just being pulled out and everything rising. This one didn't do it so much, but a lot of the times it'll actually pull those beans to the surface because it's trying to pull that air up. So here's one of the things with vacuum sealing. Just pull that off. This thing's nice and sealed. And then what I do is I use these plastic rings instead of the metal ones. I have a few of them, so I use them, because you're going to be taking these lids off and on, checking it and everything. With the alcohol and the extract being around here, they do get gummed up, and the metal rings tend to stick every now and then. These plastic ones, not so much. These are a little easier to get off and on, and all you're trying to do is make sure that this lid stays on when you're shaking them. And it doesn't matter if the seal breaks in a day or two, because my process, I reseal them. So I just put it on, hand tight. I'll shake them just to kind of get everything loose in there, since we just freshly put them in there. And then that's ready to sit on the seal, and it's starting to make extract now. So one of the other things behind vacuum sealing is, if you don't know this, it's expanding and contracting the beans, which is actually helping with pulling the fluids out, pulling out that flavor out of the bean. So right now you just put a vacuum on it, it's expanding and pulling out all that air and all those fibers and opening them up, because that's what you're doing. You're pulling a vacuum on it. So I'll let this sit for 2 days, 2-3 days, depending on my mood and depending on what I got going on around the ranch here. And then what I'll do is, because once I set them on the seal, I have them here in my hobby room, and I'm in here every day. It's my office, hobby room. It's kind of where I do everything other than my shop. But I'm in here every day, so I vigorously shake them at least 2 or 3 times a day for at least the first 2 weeks. I'll shake them. If I can, I'll do it more, because it's fascinating. I like watching them, so I try to do it more when I can. But at least twice a day for the first 2 weeks, and then after the 3rd week, I'll do it every other day, and then I just kind of taper off. But I try to do it at least 2 or 3 times a week once I get past the 6-week mark. And here's the reason why. About every 2 or 3 days, I'll come over and I'll pop the seal. You can see how tight that was. I'll pop the seal on it. For one, that just released all the air into that jar, and then those beans are now contracting back in. So you're getting this pumping motion every time you do that, which is pulling in and out that fluid around that pot. So then I'll release the pressure, open it up. I won't put the vacuum back on it. Put the lid on, put this back on, and then I'll shake it again. Why there's no vacuum, I'll shake it, let it settle, and then pop the lid off. Everything looks good. Now I just messed with it. This is why I say I like the plastic rings, because everybody's going to do this because they want to check it. But I always just make sure with the air vacuum and stuff, it's not that critical. And for what we're doing, we're not doing long-term storage or anything like that. The alcohol is going to take care of any of the bacteria. All we're doing is expanding and contraction. We're just using this as a mechanism to get our extraction faster. So then put this back on, and then so just release the pressure, pull that off, put the lid back on, and there you go. I can already see more air bubbles. I mean, look at the color of that already. I only put in like a cup of the original fluid that the beans were sitting in, with a bottle and a half of, or almost 2 bottles of the coconut rum. I use coconut rum. It's my preferred alcohol for making a good strong vanilla. I don't do flavorings or anything like that, because I do make big batches. This is 2 gallons here, and I've usually got 3 to 6 gallons going. I've been running, I've been lazy this year. Actually, I've been busy, so I'm back on track. I'm starting to make vanilla again, and this is where I'm at. So once you got that vacuum on there, just let it sit. So I hope this explains the vacuum sealing with that expansion and contraction, on how you can see this is going to speed up your process. If you don't do this because you don't have one, that's fine. Just splitting the beans and having the seeds in the jar, everything's in there, you're going to speed up your process. I know a lot of people just sit their jars on the shelf and they forget about it. I know. I forget about mine. I'll even forget about these ones, even though they're in front of my face. It's just one of those things that happen. That's pretty much it. A lot of people will ask me how much I get out of these. What are my bottles? Well, I bottle everything in 12 ounce. These are sauce bottles. You can buy on Amazon or any of these bottling companies, because sauce is a big thing right now, so these are available. I do know the holidays, things are harder to get. COVID, things are harder to get. Some of these bottles are hard to get. But my standard is this 12 ounce bottle. I get 4.5 of these 12 ounce bottles of fluid out of one of these half-gallon jars, because this is what I give away and I sell to my friends and family. At the end of my process, which I'll show, but I can't do it now because we're just started. This is December 20th, 2020. So it's going to be a couple months before I can get to the next process of bottling. Okay, so the big question is, how do I know when my vanilla extract is done or finished and ready to be bottled? So it's a big question on everybody's minds, and this is what I come up with on how to figure out when the beans are done. Vanilla beans are not the everlasting bean. They don't keep extracting forever. There is a certain point where you've extracted 90% of what the beans will give you, and the rest, the 10%, you may never get it out, or it may take years to get it out, but most likely you'll only get another 5% out of it. Actually, that 10% is not worth it for me to try to get it out. For me, it's giving somebody a good product that with a good spent bean. 10% left is a good spent bean for me. So how do I get to that point? Well, I test. I do a lot of testing. The testing that I do is very simple. About 6 weeks in, what I'll do is I'll pull out a bean, and I'll take about 1 inch of that bean and throw it in a test tube. But before I put it in there, I will take a rag and wipe it off to make sure there's no fluid in it from this batch, and so it doesn't skew the test results. I want to know what's coming off of the bean itself and not the fluid that was around it. So what I'll do is I'll put that little piece in here. Also, I'll show a little snapshot, but I'll put it in a test tube. I'll put some fresh alcohol in it, not fluid from the extract. I'll put some fresh alcohol in there. I put it in there and I shake it. Now, every time I go in and shake my jars every day, I shake that test tube, because I want to know what this is happening. And so just like the jars, you got to do the same thing with the test tube. I know at 6 weeks, 6 weeks is where I start. I know there's going to be coloration to it, and it's still going to be extracting fluid off of that bean. But I want to know how deep and how rich it is. I've done this enough times. I know what this color looks like, and the quality of the beans. That's kind of my first little test when I want to see. If this is really dark, I will wait 7 to 8 weeks before I do the next test. I'll leave this one here 7 to 8 weeks. I'll do the next test. I'll go back into the jar. I'll snip off about an inch of bean. I'll put it in this test tube after wiping it down. Put some fresh alcohol in there and shake it up. And then every time I go to shake my jars, I'll shake up both these test tubes. But I don't start reading this test tube for another week. So each one, I wait a week before I start reading it, because it's going to take a little while. It's extracting. It's doing exactly what in there as it is in here. So the coloration's going to be a little lighter than this one, depending on how much time frame you waited in between tests. And then same thing, depending on how dark this one is or how light it is when I do my next test. But I usually wait a week or 2 weeks before doing the next test. So this is not a fast process. You're still waiting a week to get some sort of result. And then depending on, like this one was 2 weeks, you're going to be 3 weeks out before you make the next test, depending on the results of this one. So I'm just going to say this was so 6 weeks, 7 weeks depending on the color, or 8 weeks, and then same thing depending on the color. Go back and look, snip off a little bean, wipe it off, put it in a test tube, put some fresh alcohol in there, and shake it up and let it set for a week before reading it. You'll see that the colors start getting lighter and lighter and lighter. I will show snapshots of this so you can see that. I know it's hard here on the camera, but you will get to the point that you're after a week of sitting in here and you will not start seeing colors. You may start seeing color after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but if you are, they're still not done. But it's going to get to the point where you don't see any color after a week, you don't start seeing color after 2 weeks, and then I wait the 3 week mark before determining if this is finished or not. If I start seeing color at the end of the 3 weeks, it's not finished. I'll wait another week, cut off another piece, wipe it down, start another test tube, and go from there. But I always give it, once I don't see color after a week, I'll give it another couple weeks before saying it's finished. Because at this point here, personally I believe we reached that 90% we've pulled out of the bean. With my process with the vacuum sealer and shaking every day and the window seal, I believe we've achieved that, because some of the tests I have done, my extract that I've pulled when it was finished with this method versus my extract that I left on the shelf for a year, no difference. The flavor was the same, the color was the same, everything was the same. Would it have changed over another year and a half or 2 years? Possibly, but it's not worth my time or effort to go beyond that. Once I get this finished this year and I'm not seeing any color after a couple weeks, I'm done. I don't need to waste my time because the flavor's not changing that much. It may after 3 years, but I personally don't think it does. I have said it before. I've had batches sitting on the shelf for 5 years. The most I've had is 5 years. I've done 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years. The 5-year one, I just tried it out the beginning of last year, and that was my test mark to see anything I've changed during those years. Does it make it better? Is it worth my time? Is it worth sitting on the shelf that long? Personally, I didn't see any difference. My 5-year stuff was just as good as the stuff I'm making today within 3 or 4 months. I feel this is a good test. It tells me what's going on with those vanilla pods, and it gives me a visual of what's happening, and I'm pretty confident at that point that I'm finished and I don't need to waste my time on the other end. Now, a lot of you guys are hobbyists and doing this for fun. That's how I'm doing it. I do enjoy doing this, and it really is sky's the limit. You guys can test and do what all this is, but I've never found a real good answer to when your extract is done. This is the only way I've kind of figured it out for my benefit. I hope this helps somebody else if you're trying to figure it out. So yeah, it's late tonight. I really want to show you the rest of my process for how I have it set up in my hobby room, because I think this is crucial too, because I do get extracts out and finished within 3 or 4 months. So 9 months, or 9 weeks to 12 weeks is when I get a finished product. And I'll explain all that in the morning. But I'll come back in the morning and show you the rest of it. Okay, today is the next day, and I kind of wanted to show you during the daylight. It was late last night, and I didn't want to show you what I do, because this is a better representation. So it's daylight now, the sun's up, everything's really bright, and I put all my jars right here on the window shelf. This is my hobby room, and because I'm going to look at these every day, because I come in here every day, and I need to shake these every day at least twice for the first couple of weeks. With it being in here, it's perfect. The other reason I do this is I'm getting free energy off of this window that's facing the sun. All the old recipes used to say cool, dark place, and I could never figure out why. So I did some testing, and I even asked questions. I've asked this group a few times, and the only thing that anybody could come up with logically was it kills some enzymes inside the vanilla. Health benefit enzymes. I don't know if there's any health benefits, because I'm not making vanilla for a health benefit. I am making it for flavor. So for me, if this ruins the flavor, I'm not going to do it. But I tested this theory out last year, actually a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I didn't see any issues with it. My vanilla came out a little bit better, actually. And the reason why is, with them sitting in the sun right here, they're heating up. And then with the sun going down, it cools down. So you've got this mechanical effect again where the molecules in there are expanding and contracting. So are the beans. So are the seeds. They're expanding and contracting. That's without even me touching them. That's just the fluid in there from it heating up. As far as the sun's concerned, from my testing, the only thing that was different between the jars that I had in the shelf and the jars I had here was the color. So the color was a little lighter, but the flavor was exactly the same. Vanilla extract was identical to the two, other than the color. So, and when I did my test, just like I did these batches here, I would have taken these two bottles. It's the same time I made it, same alcohol, same beans, same formula, same everything. Put some here in the windowsill, put some in the shelf, cool, dark, and that's how I do my test. I make sure everything is controlled and sitting that way. Then we talk about heat from here. It never gets up above 110 degrees. I check it on the hottest days. I'll put my thermometer on it and see where it's at, because I don't want them getting too hot. So about 110. I think the most I've ever seen it's 112 degrees, but then it cools down every night. It's another reason why I vacuum seal, because these will expand and contract. With it being vacuum sealed, they'll never expand over and overfill the bottles or pop the seal doing it this way. Some people say heat's bad for it, but I'm seeing people sous vide everything, or crock potting it, or this and that to start the process. This is the same thing. So I don't know why my method's any different than any others, other than there's sunlight. The flavor is great. So this is my process. I put them here in the windowsill, and I come by every day, and I shake the bottles, I check them out, look at everything. After they're shaken, I can't really see what's going on, but I could tell definitely by the color just from last night on what it is today. And you will see stuff floating because they're not fully saturated yet. Once they get fully saturated and all those air pockets get blown up and popped, everything will settle down to the bottom. But I'm shaking them every day, popping all those air bubbles, and it's great. And I can look at it. I enjoy looking at it instead of in a closet or a cabinet, because it's pretty. I keep it here with my honey. I've had some bottles of honey that crystallized on me, and this is where I do my bottling. So just by having them here in the sun, got rid of the crystallization. The enzymes a little bit, because there's a lot of enzymes and health benefits to honey. I'm not so much worried about it because I never get above that threshold where I'm killing off the beneficial enzymes. But it does keep my honey nice and crystal clear, and I'm using free sun. So, and it looks pretty. Everybody looks pretty. So that's where I'm at. This is why I do it, my process. Now these bottles will sit here for the next, well, they'll sit here until I'm finished, or until those are finished. These will start getting darker and darker every day, and then I'll start my testing. So my next video will be how I remove the seeds and the pods, and then start bottling. Yeah, so that's where we're at. That's my process. I'll be honest with you, it's a pain in the butt. But my consistency is there. I can replicate this every time. The only thing that's the changing factor are the beans that we get and time of year, if they're what's available. Yeah. Other than that, and what if you're changing alcohols? I don't change alcohols anymore. But yeah, so consistency for me is a big deal, because I make these big batches. I might make some smaller gift bottles, but for right now, I don't do that. Everybody's happy with these 12 ounce bottles. I'm happy with them, and it's an easier process. I don't have to mess with a ton of stuff. I used to. So I used to put my beans directly in these bottles. I didn't use the half gallon. And this is another reason why I say the half gallons. I used to put them directly in here. Why waste all this other stuff? Other bottles, when you're going to put them in smaller bottles later. It is better just to put them in a big bottle and then just shake the bottle. With the half gallons, you don't have this bottleneck right here. sometimes the beans will get stuck up in here. And when I shake this bottle, I'm shaking 2 of these bottles. I know there's a little weight issue. I'm a bigger person, so that's not a problem for me. But my wife and my daughter both can shake these. And you're doing 1 instead of having to do 2. Because it does get taunting, and you will forget about these. And miss a day or 2. I try not to, because like I said, I'm in here every day. But the reason I stopped using these was the beans were getting bottlenecked up into here, and they weren't shaken as vigorously as these were, because there was less room, a lot more room in here. You have that big wide mouth on top, nothing gets stuck, and the beans get tossed around a lot better. So that's why I stopped using the bottles. Yeah, other than that, that's where I'm at. That's my almost my whole complete process up until the extracting part. And I love vanilla. So last night when we were processing, it takes us about an hour per bottle to split and scrape all the beans. A little less than that depending on, I was getting in a rhythm, and it was about 35 minutes to do that. It is a pain in the butt. My wife, my daughter were here on this table processing. I don't want to clean this up yet because it smells so good in here. I mean, this room smells like vanilla. It always smells good between the honey and the vanilla. But yeah, I don't know if I want to clean this up yet. It just smells good. Alright, so if you guys like my videos, please subscribe to my channel. Please like them. And then hit the notification bell if you want to see the other ones as they pop up. I hope to continue doing more of these on some of the other stuff. If you have any comments, please leave them below. Trust me, I try to answer everybody's, but between comments on YouTube and Facebook and messages that I get from these videos, it's hard to get to them right away. Some of the times I don't get those notifications, but I will try to answer your questions as soon as I can or as soon as I see them. And I do appreciate everybody's support and everybody's comments. It's one of the reasons why I do this. I like helping people. I do like teaching my methods and the reasoning behind them. So anyway, good luck with your adventure on making vanilla. I hope you guys decide to try it someday, or if you're in the process of doing it, I hope these what I do helps you decide what you do. Alright, from Clements Family Farms, I'm out. Until the next video. Alright, I just wanted to explain a little bit about my beard, because I know I'm going to get asked these questions because it's a little different than from my last videos. I don't mind the gray. It doesn't bother me at all. But with this COVID going on, our kids are at home and they don't get to go out and visit with their friends. So it's really sad for me to see all these kids being cooped up. Anyway, my daughter, she's my world, so she wanted to dye her hair while our normal salon's not open, and I'm pretty crafty, so she asked me if I would dye it for her. So I did, and it turned out pretty good. That was a few months ago, and it looked really good. So we did it again just about a week ago. We changed a few things, and then I posted my pictures on my Facebook, and then everybody started egging me on. So, why don't you dye your beard? So I asked my daughter if she would do it, and she was like ecstatic. So she did, and this is where we are. So half black, well, it's kind of green now because it's not permanent, and then the other half is this red. So that's why the beard
it is the color it is. So anyway, it's gonna go away soon. I'm not shaving it. I'm just gonna recolor it and move on. So our kids need our support at all times during this COVID. It doesn't matter what it is. Just be creative with them, do something with them, and that'll help. So that's my take on that.